Indian national movement was initiated by moderates and radicals during its first 20 years of existence. Indian national movement against the British was led by the Indian National Congress. The Indian National Congress was founded in 1885 under the guidance of A.O. Hume, a retired British civil servant. History of the Indian national movement led by Indian National Congress can be divided into three phases. Moderate phase from 1885 to 1905. Radical phase 1905 to 1918. And Gandhian phase 1918 to 1947. Let's talk about moderate and radical phases. Moderate phase. Dada Bhai Naroji, Surendranath Banerjee and Gopal Krishna Gokhale were some of the main leaders during the moderate phase, who initially led the Indian National Congress and were known as the moderates. The moderates believed that the British rule had benefited India. They wanted the continuation of British rule as they regarded it as just and progressive in nature. They wanted to win the support of the British to introduce reforms in the system gradually. The moderates wanted to participate in the government in near future to obtain self-government gradually. Moderates believed in peacefully presenting their appeals to the British government and waiting patiently for laws to be passed to address them. They also conducted meetings, lectures and the press to promote unity and spread political awareness among the people. Moderates expected the British to introduce social reforms for the betterment of the Indians. The moderates trained the Indians regarding freedom, democracy and nationalism. They actually established solid foundation for the radicals in the later years. They spread political awareness and sense of national unity amongst people. Radical phase. The second phase of the Indian National Congress was led by the radicals or extremists from 1905 to 1918. Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Lala Lajpat Rai, Bipin Chandra Pal and Aurobindo Ghosh were the main leaders of the radical phase and were known as the radicals. Their political views, aims and methods were different from the moderates. Since the British colonial policies led to the decline in cotton trade in India, the radicals did not believe the British to be honest in their efforts towards improving India. As the British chose to support their cotton industry in Lancashire, the radicals realized that the British and Indian interests were very different, and Indians could not progress under British rule. Radicals wanted immediate freedom, that is, Swaraj from British rule. After the division of Bengal in 1905 by Lord Curzon, the radicals got provoked and adopted method of active opposition against the government with the involvement and support of masses. They converted the national struggle into a freedom fight by adopting methods like boycott of British goods and use of Swadeshi goods. Both The moderate and the radical phases helped in laying the foundation of the freedom struggle which was taken forward by Mahatma Gandhi.
During the World War I, the ordinary Indian suffered due to heavy taxation by the British government. While Indian soldiers were sent abroad to fight for the British against their wishes, the common man became aware of the exploitative and selfish rule of the British and decided to oppose it. Apart from other areas, people began to draw their inspiration from the Russian Revolution of 1917. Which taught them to include peasants and workers in their struggle against the British.
Come, brothers, let's drive the British out of India.
During this time, Mahatma Gandhi, father of the Indian nation, returned to India from South Africa in 1915 to unite the workers and peasants all over India in their struggle against the British. Before coming to India in 1915, Gandhiji, along with other Indians, had established the Natal Congress in 1895 to fight against racial discrimination in South Africa. In India, Gandhiji intervened in local movements in Champaran, Kheda, and led a successful mill workers' strike in Ahmedabad in 1918. Later, Gandhiji gave a call to the people for joining protests against the Rowlatt Act in 1919 by observing 9th April as a day of prayer and fasting. It became the first All India Satyagraha for Gandhiji.
Come, brothers and sisters, let's join hands against the injustice of the British government.
During the Rowlatt Satyagraha, the famous Jallianwala Bagh massacre occurred, where thousands of unarmed Indians were fired upon by General Dyer. Surrounded on all sides by high walls, the peaceful Indian protesters tried hard to escape the non-stop firing by the British troops. Large number of people were killed instantly. In panic, many men, women and children drowned after jumping into the well on the premises to escape the British bullets. The incident convinced Gandhiji that the British rule in India was evil. Gandhiji approached Muhammad Ali and Shaukat Ali, who were protesting against the British treatment of Caliph in Turkey, through their Khilafat movement to launch a joint Hindu-Muslim protest against the British. This momentous cooperation between Hindus and Muslims gave even more impetus to the Indian independence movement against the British. This collaboration resulted in the successful launch of the non-cooperation movement along with the Khilafat movement. Many lawyers like C.R. Das, and Motilal Nehru joined the movement by renouncing their legal practice. The non-cooperation movement also witnessed the burning of foreign goods. Many tribal communities staged forest satyagrahas, hoping that Gandhiji would help them in easing the restrictions placed by British authorities on the use of forest land. During this movement, the Sikhs demanded the removal of corrupt Mahants from Gurdwaras. These corrupt Mahants were supported by the British government and worked against the interests of common Indian people. With the success of non-cooperation and Khilafat movement, Gandhiji began to be seen as a Masiha by all sections of the Indian society. He was seen as a divine being who was the guiding force behind other Indian national leaders as they fought for an independent India against the British. With the non-cooperation and Khilafat movement, Gandhiji began a new era of mass politics in India, whereby the entire country, irrespective of class, caste and gender, united to fight against the British on an all-India level.
British Raj down, down! Gandhiji Zindabad! British Raj down, down!
The whole nation had been geared up to forget fear and come out in the open to fight for freedom. In 1927, Simon Commission was set up with the sole objective to study the political reform in India. This was not welcomed by the Indian leaders, as none of the members of the commission were Indians. Therefore, they decided to boycott it when the commission arrived in India in February 1928. They shouted slogans, "Simon, go back! Simon, go back!" In this protest, Lala Lajpat Rai was severely hurt and later he succumbed to his injuries on November 17, 1928. In 1929, the Indian National Congress met at Lahore under the leadership of Jawaharlal Nehru. The motive was to declare a Purna Swaraj and enjoy complete freedom. Therefore, the new tricolour flag was hoisted and the first Independence Day was declared on 26 January 1930. This day is celebrated as the Republic Day in India. Amidst this, the British government in India tried to offer political concessions. However, those were not accepted to the Indian National Congress. Here, Gandhiji gave a call for a civil disobedience movement on March 12, 1930. With this movement, the laws passed by the British were disobeyed. Protest was made against liquor shops, foreign goods were burned, and government schools and colleges were boycotted. Civil disobedience movement was launched by Gandhiji with Salt Satyagraha in March 1930. The British East India Company had imposed high tax on salt. It also barred the people from making salt. The Salt Satyagraha began with the historic Dandi March. It started from Sabarmati on March 12, 1930. He reached the coastal village of Dandi on April 6th. As a symbol to defy the British laws, Gandhiji picked up a handful of salt. People began to manufacture salt and sell it openly on the streets. The movement also saw active participation of a large number of women under the leadership of Sarojini Naidu. The government tried suppressing the movement by arresting all important Congress leaders. The civil disobedience movement inspired many more people. Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan formed a society of Khudai Khidmatkars, or servants of God. This society consisted of Pathans and was known as the Red Shirts. Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan was popularly called the Frontier Gandhi. The impact of civil disobedience movement was strong, and it shook the strong foundation of the British Empire in India.
When the Simon Commission arrived in India, it was totally boycotted by the Indian Congress leaders. However, the report of the Simon Commission was published during the civil disobedience movement. The then British Prime Minister Ramsay MacDonald called for a roundtable conference in London. The sole objective of the conference was to discuss the recommendations of the report of Simon Commission. However, this conference was not a success for various reasons. The Congress leaders did not participate, and without their participation, no agreement could be arrived at. Some leaders of the Muslim League, few princely states, and few representatives of various parties attended the conference. Gandhiji was requested by the representatives of the Roundtable Conference to discuss openly with Viceroy Lord Irwin. Lord Irwin was interested in bridging the differences and putting an end to the civil disobedience movement. In spite of opposition from the younger members, Gandhiji and Lord Irwin signed the Gandhi-Irwin Pact on March 4, 1931. It was passed by the Congress on 6th March 1931. After this, Gandhiji agreed to take part in the second Roundtable Conference. He attended it along with Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya and Sarojini Naidu. In this conference, Gandhiji demanded for a responsible government and independence in India. It was here that B.R. Ambedkar, who was representing the Harijans, demanded that they should fight as a separate group in order to uplift their economic and social status. Gandhiji returned to India without achieving anything. He renewed the civil disobedience movement. The British government announced the Communal Award on 16th August 1932, granting separate electorates for the Hindus, Harijans and Muslims. Gandhiji was strictly against it and fasted for 6 days while he was in Yerwada jail. Gandhiji and Dr. Ambedkar signed the Pune Pact, in which it was decided that there would be a single Hindu electorate and the scheduled castes would have increased number of seats in the legislature. Finally, the third Roundtable Conference took place, which was held from 17th November to 24th December 1932. The Congress did not participate, and its decision ultimately led to the passing of the Government of India Act 1935.